Then I learned that some men don't raise their voices. They simply erase the reason you were crying. My shift at Mercy General was supposed to end at 11 p.m. Instead, I walked out at 2:07 in the morning with aching feet, cold coffee in my travel mug, and exactly $43.12 in my checking account. The automatic doors hissed shut behind me, sealing off 16 hours of charting, worried patients, and fluorescent lights that made everyone look more exhausted than they already were. Rain drifted across the parking lot in silver sheets, turning the asphalt into a mirror. My 10-year-old Honda Accord sat alone beneath a flickering security light, looking as tired as I felt. Noah was asleep in the back seat, curled under his dinosaur blanket with his stuffed bear tucked under one arm. 7 years old, and he still slept with the same teddy bear he'd had since his first birthday. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the car door and let the rain soak through my scrubs. Sometimes I did that when life felt too heavy, as if the storm could wash away the parts of me I no longer recognized. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Ryan. My ex-husband had an uncanny ability to appear whenever I was already hanging by a thread. The screen glowed in the darkness. Unknown men don't raise my son. Answer your phone. My chest tightened. Another message appeared before I could lock the screen. You can't hide from me forever. Emily. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, but the silence only made the words louder. For 3 months, Ryan had ignored the custody agreement, shown up unexpectedly, and filled my voicemail with apologies that turned into accusations if I didn't respond quickly enough. He always insisted he loved us. Somehow, that made it worse. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I tried to breathe slowly, the way I taught anxious patients. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. It didn't help. The first tear slipped down my cheek before I realized I was crying. Then another. Soon I was bent over the steering wheel, shoulders shaking, trying desperately not to make a sound that would wake Noah. I was 29 years old, a registered nurse, a mother, and the strongest person I knew. But in that moment, I felt like a little girl pretending she wasn't scared. A small voice came from the back seat. Mom. I wiped my face quickly and turned around. Noah was awake, his green eyes still heavy with sleep. Bad dream? I asked, forcing a smile. He shook his head. You're crying again. Children don't ask questions the way adults do. They simply tell the truth. Before I could answer, a gust of wind swept through the lot as I opened my door. Noah's teddy bear slipped from his lap and tumbled onto the wet pavement. Mr. Buttons, he gasped. He unbuckled before I could stop him and darted into the rain. My heart lurched as headlights cut through the darkness and a sleek black Maserati turned the corner. Gliding toward my son like a shadow I hadn't seen coming, the world stopped in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Noah stood frozen in the rain, his small sneakers splashing in a puddle as Mr. Buttons lay on the pavement a few feet away. The black Maserati glided toward him with terrifying silence, its headlights washing my son in white light. I did not think. I screamed his name and ran. The tires stopped with a sharp hiss less than a yard from Noah's knees. My breath caught so hard it hurt. Noah stared up at the car, too startled to move. I reached him a second later and dropped to my knees in the rain, pulling him against me so tightly he squeaked in protest. Mom, I am okay, he whispered, his voice trembling. I could not answer. My whole body shook as I pressed my lips to his wet hair and thanked God for the inches that had separated him from disaster. The driver's door opened. Italian leather shoes touched the pavement first. Then, a man unfolded from the car with the kind of controlled grace that made everything around him seem ordinary by comparison. He was tall, well over 6 feet, dressed in a charcoal overcoat that fit his broad shoulders like it had been tailored by hand. Rain beaded on dark hair brushed away from a face too striking to ignore. Strong jaw, straight nose, eyes so dark they seemed almost black beneath the parking lot lights. He looked like the sort of man who never rushed and never apologized. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was deep, calm, and unmistakably Italian. Not the exaggerated accent from movies, but something softer and more dangerous because it was real. Noah clutched my neck and shook his head before I could speak. I dropped Mr. Buttons. The man bent without hesitation, picked up the soaked teddy bear from the puddle, and brushed the water from its worn fur with surprising care. Then he handed it back to Noah, as if returning something priceless. "A brave bear," he said quietly. Noah hugged the toy to his chest and gave him a solemn nod. "Thank you." I finally found my voice. "I am so sorry." He ran before I could stop him. The stranger studied me, and I became painfully aware of my damp scrubs, my mascara streaked with tears, and the exhaustion I could no longer hide. Most men would have looked away out of politeness. He did not. He noticed everything: my trembling hands, my swollen eyes, the way Noah held on to me as if he was afraid I might disappear. His gaze sharpened. Not cruel, not intrusive, focused, like he was assembling a puzzle from pieces I had not meant to reveal. My phone began vibrating again in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in a row. I flinched before I could stop myself. The man's eyes dropped to the fabric of my scrub top, where the screen cast a pale blue glow. Then he looked back at me. "Someone is causing you pain," he said. It was not a question. Rain slid down his face, but he did not seem to notice. Neither did I. For the first time in months, someone had looked at me and seen the truth I had worked so hard to conceal. Noah tightened his grip around my neck. The stranger crouched until he was at eye level with my son. His expensive coat darkened against the wet pavement, and his voice turned even gentler. "Who made your mother cry?" Noah answered before I could stop him. "My dad makes her cry." The words landed in the rain-soaked silence with the weight of something sacred and irreversible. Children do not know how to soften the truth. They simply hand it to you with both hands and trust you to hold it. I felt my face burn. "Noah," I whispered, brushing wet hair from his forehead. "That is enough." But the stranger did not look surprised. If anything, his expression grew even stiller, as though some internal decision had already been made. "Your father should not make your mother cry," he said to Noah with quiet certainty. Noah nodded against my shoulder. I told him to stop. My throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. I had spent years trying to protect my son from adult problems, and yet here he was, standing in the rain and speaking with the weary honesty of someone much older than 7. My phone vibrated again. The buzzing seemed unnaturally loud. I wanted to ignore it, but the stranger extended his hand. Not demanding, simply waiting. Every instinct told me to refuse. I did not know this man. I did not know why his presence felt both dangerous and strangely safe. But something in his gaze made lying feel pointless. With trembling fingers, I removed the phone from my pocket. The screen lit my hand in cold blue. Ryan's latest message was impossible to miss. "If you do not answer, I will come to your apartment." The stranger's eyes scanned the words. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he looked up at me. "Does he often threaten you?" he asked. I hugged Noah closer. "He says things when he is upset. Even to my own ears." The excuse sounded tired and hollow. The stranger's expression did not change, but his voice turned softer. That was not my question. Rainwater slid down my cheeks. Mingling with tears, I was too exhausted to hide. "He does not hurt us," I said quickly. "He just does not know when to let go." The stranger studied me for a long moment. In the distance, thunder rolled across the city like a warning. Finally, he slipped his hand inside his overcoat and produced a pristine white handkerchief with subtle silver stitching along the edge. He offered it to me as if we were standing in a ballroom instead of a nearly empty hospital parking lot at 2 a.m. "For your tears," he said. The absurd gentleness of the gesture nearly undid me. I accepted the handkerchief with shaking fingers. The fabric was impossibly soft, carrying the faint scent of cedar and expensive cologne. Noah, still clutching Mr. Buttons, peered up at the man with open curiosity. "What is your name?" he asked. A flicker of warmth touched the stranger's face. "Alessandro De Luca." Even his name sounded powerful, controlled, old world and deliberate. I had heard that surname before. In whispered conversations between doctors and administrators, in news stories that never quite explained why certain men seemed untouchable. My pulse quickened. Alessandro rose to his full height and glanced at the glowing phone in my hand one final time. Then he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a simple black business card, embossed only with his name and a number. No company logo, no title, nothing unnecessary. He placed it gently into my palm and closed my fingers around it. His touch was brief, but the warmth lingered. "If he contacts you again tonight," Alessandro said, his dark eyes locking onto mine, "you call me instead." I stared at the black business card resting in my palm as if it might dissolve in the rain. Alessandro De Luca. Just a name and a phone number. No title. No company. No explanation for why a stranger who drove a $250,000 Maserati was offering to solve problems I had spent 3 years trying to survive on my own. "Thank you," I whispered, because it was the only thing I could think to say. Alessandro inclined his head once, as though gratitude was expected, but unnecessary. "Drive home carefully. Emily." The sound of my name on his lips sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the weather. I had never told him my name. My pulse skipped. "How do you know who I am?" For the first time, something almost like a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Your hospital badge," he said. Heat rushed to my cheeks. Of course. My identification card was clipped to the pocket of my scrubs, my photograph and full name plainly visible to anyone standing close enough to read it. I felt foolish for imagining a darker explanation, though the sensation of being seen remained. Alessandro looked down at Noah. "You should get your mother home. It is late." Noah hugged Mr. Buttons to his chest and nodded solemnly. "Thank you for not hitting me." Alessandro's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face. "You are very welcome, young man." He rose, buttoned his coat with a precise motion, and stepped back toward the Maserati. Before opening the driver's door, he looked at me one final time. The rain blurred the edges of the world, but his gaze remained impossibly clear. "Do not ignore fear when it is trying to protect you," he said quietly. Then he slipped into the car and drove away, taillights disappearing into the storm like two red embers fading into darkness. For several seconds, I remained frozen beside my Honda. Noah's small hand tucked inside mine, Alessandro's words echoing in my mind. "Do not ignore fear when it is trying to protect you." It sounded less like advice and more like a warning. The drive home to Queens took 23 minutes. Noah fell asleep before we crossed the Queensboro Bridge, his damp teddy bear clutched under his chin. I kept both hands on the steering wheel and checked my mirrors more often than necessary. Ryan called 6 more times. I did not answer. By the time we reached our apartment building, my exhaustion had settled into my bones like cold. I carried Noah upstairs, changed him into dry pajamas, and tucked him into bed without waking him. "Mr." Buttons rested beneath his arm, freshly blow-dried and smelling faintly of lavender detergent. I stood in his doorway for a long moment, watching his chest rise and fall in the soft glow of his nightlight. He looked peaceful, safe, everything I had spent my adult life trying to provide. My phone buzzed again in the kitchen. Another message from Ryan. "You think you can replace me? I know where you live." My fingers trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I should have called the police. I should have blocked his number. Instead, I found myself opening my hand and staring at the black card Alessandro had given me. The silver lettering caught the light from above the stove. I told myself I was not going to use it. That calling a mysterious stranger in the middle of the night was irrational. Dangerous, even. Then my apartment buzzer sounded at exactly 3:14 a.m., and Ryan's voice came through the intercom. "Emily, open the door." My blood turned to ice. Ryan's voice crackled through the intercom speaker, with the familiar mix of charm and entitlement that had once sounded like love. "Emily, I know you are awake. Open the door so we can talk." Talk. Ryan always called it talking when what he meant was wearing me down until I no longer trusted my own judgment. I glanced down the hallway toward Noah's bedroom. His nightlight cast a soft blue glow beneath the door. He was asleep. For the moment. He was safe. The buzzer sounded again. Longer this time. My hands shook so hard the black business card nearly slipped from my fingers. Alessandro's number stared back at me in elegant silver lettering. I had known this man for less than 10 minutes. I did not know what he did for a living or why his eyes held the kind of authority that made even my fear pause and listen. But I remembered the certainty in his voice. "If he contacts you again tonight, you call me instead." Another buzz rattled the apartment, then Ryan's voice returned. Louder now. "Emily, do not make me stand out here all night." The old instinct rose immediately. Keep the peace, avoid conflict. Do whatever it takes to prevent a scene. But another voice, quieter and stronger, spoke beneath it. The voice Alessandro had awakened in me. "Do not ignore fear when it is trying to protect you." Before I could lose my nerve, I dialed the number. The line rang once. "Emily." He answered as if he had been expecting my call. Not hello. Not who is this. Just my name, spoken in that calm, deep voice that seemed immune to panic. I gripped the phone tighter. He is here. Silence for half a heartbeat. Then, are you and Noah inside with the door locked? Yes. Good. His tone remained steady, but something in it sharpened. Do not open the door. Do not speak to him through the intercom again. I pressed my free hand against my chest, trying to slow my breathing. I'm sorry to call so late. You never apologize for asking for help. The simplicity of that sentence hit me harder than any grand declaration could have. Tears burned my eyes. Downstairs, the buzzer sounded for the third time. Ryan's frustration crackled through the speaker. Emily, this is ridiculous. Alessandro's voice became even quieter. Listen to me carefully. Put your phone on speaker and set it beside you. Stay with your son. What are you going to do? I whispered. There was a pause, and when he answered, his words carried the same certainty as the tide. I am going to make sure he understands that your tears are no longer his to cause. The line remained open. I walked to Noah's room on trembling legs and sat on the edge of his bed, watching his small hand curled around Mr. Buttons. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window. Downstairs, the intercom fell silent. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No more buzzing, no raised voices, only the sound of Noah's steady breathing and Alessandro's quiet presence on the other end of the line. Finally, he spoke. You can sleep now, Emily? My throat tightened. How do you know he is gone? Another brief silence. Because he will not disturb you tonight. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I closed my eyes, exhausted beyond words. Thank you. Alessandro's reply was barely above a whisper, yet it settled around me like a promise. No one makes you cry tonight. I did not remember falling asleep. One moment I was sitting beside Noah's bed, with my phone pressed to my ear, and Alessandro's steady breathing on the other end of the line. The next, pale morning light spilled across the quilt, and birds chattered outside the window as if the world had always been this calm. My neck ached from sleeping upright. Noah was still curled around Mr. Buttons, his expression peaceful in a way I had not seen for weeks. For one precious moment, I allowed myself to believe the night had changed something fundamental. Then my phone vibrated in my hand. The call with Alessandro had ended sometime before dawn. In its place was a single text message sent at 5:12 a.m. Sleep. Everything is handled. No signature. No explanation. Just 6 words that settled into my chest like warmth. I read them 3 times. There were no new messages from Ryan. No missed calls. No voicemails alternating between apology and accusation. The silence felt so unfamiliar that it was almost unsettling. At 8:43 a.m., while Noah ate cereal and explained in great detail why Mr. Buttons preferred blueberry waffles to Honey Nut Cheerios, my phone rang again. This time it was the director of nursing at a private pediatric clinic on the Upper East Side. Her tone was brisk but enthusiastic. Emily Carter, we reviewed your resume and would like to offer you the position of clinical coordinator, effective immediately. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. I think there must be some mistake. No mistake, she said. Your references were exceptional. The salary is $145,000 annually, plus full benefits and tuition reimbursement should you pursue your nurse practitioner certification. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table because my knees no longer trusted me. The offer was more than double what I currently earned at Mercy General, enough to replace my aging car, enough to stop calculating grocery totals before reaching the checkout line, enough to build a life that did not revolve around survival. I never applied, I said softly. The director paused for a fraction of a second. Someone whose judgment I trust very much suggested we take a closer look at your qualifications. My heart began to beat faster. She continued. Would you like the position, Ms. Carter? I looked across the table at Noah, who was using a spoon as a catapult to launch blueberries into his cereal bowl. I thought of overdue bills, sleepless nights, and the constant fear that one unexpected expense could unravel everything. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I would. After I ended the call, there was a knock at my apartment door. My pulse spiked until I checked the peephole and saw an older woman in a navy suit holding a leather portfolio. Her silver hair was pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, and her posture radiated quiet competence. Good morning, Miss Carter, she said when I opened the door. My name is Teresa, Mr. DeLuca asked me to deliver a few items. She stepped inside and handed me a folder containing my employment contract, a list of reputable childcare options near the clinic, and keys attached to a silver keychain. I stared at them in confusion. What are these? Teresa's expression softened. The keys to a townhouse in Astoria with a security system and a small backyard. Mr. DeLuca thought Noah might enjoy having room to play. My throat tightened as I looked from the keys to the elegant handwriting on the note tucked inside the folder. 2 simple sentences. You deserve peace. Let me help. For the first time in years, my life began changing faster than my fear could keep up. By Friday afternoon, Noah and I were standing in front of a narrow brick townhouse on a quiet tree-lined street in Astoria. White shutters framed the windows. A small maple tree shaded the front walk. And behind the house, according to Teresa, there was a fenced backyard with enough space for a 7-year-old boy and one very brave teddy bear to have adventures. Noah squeezed my hand so tightly I could feel his excitement pulsing through his fingers. Mom, he whispered, staring at the little blue bicycle parked on the porch. Do we really get to live here? I looked at the silver key in my hand and still could not quite believe it. 3 days earlier, I had been crying in my car, wondering how long I could keep holding my world together. Now I was unlocking the front door to a home that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Hardwood floors gleamed in the afternoon light. The kitchen had marble counters and a breakfast nook overlooking the backyard. Upstairs, Noah discovered a bedroom painted soft green with a bookshelf shaped like a tree. He stood in the center of the room, clutching Mr. buttons to his chest, and turned to me with wide eyes. This looks like the room from my dreams. That was the moment I had to turn away so he would not see me cry again. Not from fear this time. From relief so profound it almost hurt. My new position at the clinic was everything the director had promised. Natural light streamed through the treatment rooms. The staff was kind. The patients were children whose parents thanked me instead of treating me like an invisible part of the machinery. On my second day, fresh flowers appeared on my desk. White roses and eucalyptus in a crystal vase. No card, no explanation. But the scent of cedar lingered faintly on the ribbon tied around the stems, and I knew exactly who had sent them. Alessandro did not call. He did not appear unannounced. He did not ask for gratitude or repayment. He simply rearranged the pieces of my life and stepped back, as though protecting me was as natural to him as breathing. Ryan, meanwhile, vanished into a silence so complete it felt unreal. No calls, no texts, no late-night appearances at my apartment door. Even his attorney sent a surprisingly cooperative email regarding a revised custody schedule. I should have felt suspicious. Instead, I slept through the night for the first time in months. One Sunday afternoon, Noah and I were planting tomato seedlings in the backyard when he looked up from the dirt beneath his fingernails and said, "I miss Alessandro." I blinked in surprise. "You only met him for a few minutes." Noah shrugged with the solemn wisdom unique to children. That was enough. He pressed a tiny seedling into the soil and patted the earth around it. He looked at you like doctors look at sick people they really want to help. The simplicity of his observations stole my breath. Because he was right. Alessandro had not looked at me with pity, or desire, or judgment. He had looked at me as though my pain was a problem he intended to solve. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I found myself standing by the kitchen window with Alessandro's business card between my fingers. The silver lettering had begun to soften from how often I traced it. I told myself I only wanted to thank him properly. That was all. But when I finally gathered the courage to call, his voice answered on the first ring, warm and certain, as though he had been waiting. "Emily," he said quietly, "I was wondering when you would let me hear your voice again." His penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Manhattan. But the first thing I noticed when the elevator doors opened was not the view. It was the silence. The kind of silence that exists only in places where every detail has been controlled. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city in 1,000 points of light. Marble floors reflected the glow of recessed lamps. Everything was elegant, immaculate, and strangely untouched, as if beauty had been carefully arranged for someone too busy to enjoy it. Alessandro met me at the elevator wearing a charcoal sweater and dark slacks instead of one of his perfectly tailored suits. The softer clothing should have made him seem less formidable. It did not. He still carried that same impossible composure, the sense that the world adjusted itself around him. But there was something else tonight. Fatigue. A subtle heaviness around his eyes that made him appear more human than I had ever seen him. "Thank you for coming," he said, taking my coat with the same quiet formality he brought to everything. "Thank you for inviting me." I had left Noah with Teresa, who had become a fixture in our lives with the gentle inevitability of family. She adored him. He adored her. And for the first time since becoming a mother, I had accepted an evening meant solely for myself. Alessandro led me to the terrace. The city spread beneath us like a field of stars. A small table had been set with tea and cannoli from a bakery in Astoria that Noah had declared magical. The detail tightened something in my chest. He remembered everything. We talked for hours about my patience, about Noah's obsession with dinosaurs and tomato plants, about his childhood in Sicily, where his grandmother taught him that strength meant protecting those who depended on you. He spoke with measured honesty, revealing pieces of himself the way a man might unlock doors in a house he had kept closed for years. At one point, I turned and found him watching me with that same unwavering focus I had felt in the hospital parking lot. "What?" I asked softly. Alessandro rested his cup on the table. "Do you know what I saw the first night?" I shook my head. His gaze did not leave mine. I saw a woman carrying more than anyone should be asked to carry alone. The words settled over me with breathtaking tenderness. No one had ever described my life so accurately. Not as weakness, not as failure, as weight. My eyes stung. Alessandro reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my cheek with reverent restraint. And I knew, he continued, his voice lower now, that if I walked away, I would think about your tears for the rest of my life. The city lights blurred. Why, I whispered, for the first time since I had met him. Alessandro looked almost vulnerable. He turned toward the skyline, one hand resting on the stone railing. Because I understand loneliness. Emily. The admission was so quiet, I almost missed it. He gestured toward the vast, beautiful penthouse behind us. Everyone sees power. Very few see the cost of it. I looked through the glass walls at the immaculate rooms, the untouched piano, the dining table large enough for 12 but set for none. Suddenly, I understood. This was not a kingdom. It was a monument to solitude. Alessandro faced me again, his dark eyes stripped of every defense. You and Noah brought laughter into a life that had become far too quiet. My heart beat so hard it was almost painful. And if I am being selfish, he said, stepping closer, I do not want to lose that sound. Rain began to fall, soft and silver around us. Alessandro lifted his hand to my face, his thumb brushing away a tear I had not realized was there. His voice dropped to a whisper that seemed to belong to the storm itself. Emily, I think I fell in love with you the moment your son told me who made you cry. Rain shimmered around us like falling silver as Alessandro's words settled into the space between our heartbeats. I should have been frightened by how quickly this man had become essential to my life. Instead, standing on a terrace high above Manhattan with the city glowing beneath us, I felt something I had almost forgotten was possible. Peace. My breath trembled. Alessandro, I whispered, and his name felt like a prayer. He did not rush me. That was one of the first things I had learned about him. For all his power, he never demanded what I was not ready to give. He simply stood close enough for me to feel his warmth, his hand resting lightly against my cheek, as though I were something infinitely precious. You do not have to say anything tonight, he said softly. But some truths become too large to keep inside. I covered his hand with mine. I think I started falling in love with you the night you answered the phone on the first ring. For a moment, the powerful man the world feared looked almost undone. His eyes closed briefly, as if my words had reached a place no one else was allowed to touch. When he opened them again, every carefully maintained distance between us was gone. He kissed my forehead with a tenderness that made tears slip down my cheeks. Not tears of fear, not tears of exhaustion. Tears of being seen, protected, and loved without conditions. 6 months later, the maple tree in our front yard blazed red and gold beneath the October sun. Noah raced through the backyard wearing a pirate hat and brandishing a plastic sword while Mr. Button served as his first mate. I stood on the porch wrapped in Alessandro's coat, which still smelled faintly of cedar and rain. He stepped beside me, one arm circling my waist with familiar certainty. Some things in life happened slowly. Others arrived all at once, like storms that changed the landscape forever. Ryan remained a distant figure who respected every boundary. My work at the clinic flourished. Noah laughed more than he ever had in his young life, and Alessandro, despite commanding a world I still did not fully understand, came home each evening with the same quiet devotion in his eyes. "Mom," Noah shouted from the yard, "come see my treasure." We joined him beside the tomato plants we had grown together. He dug through a small wooden box and pulled out a ring of braided grass he had made himself. His cheeks turned pink with seriousness. "This is for practice," he announced, handing it to Alessandro. "For when you ask my mom to marry you." I covered my mouth, laughing through tears. Alessandro crouched to Noah's level and accepted the crooked little ring as though it were crafted from diamonds. "Then I should practice properly," he said. He turned to me and, to my astonishment, sank to one knee on the grass. From his pocket, he withdrew a velvet box. Inside, a pear-shaped diamond caught the autumn sunlight and scattered it into 1,000 brilliant sparks. Noah bounced beside us, unable to contain himself. Alessandro looked up at me with the same unwavering intensity he had worn the first night he asked who made me cry. But now there was no darkness in the question, only love. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You and your son transformed my house into a home and my silence into laughter. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making sure your tears are only tears of happiness?" I could not speak through the sob building in my throat, so I nodded. Alessandro slid the ring onto my finger. Noah threw his arms around both of us, and in that golden backyard, held between the two people who had become my entire world, I understood the simplest truth of all. He may have ruled an empire, but the only kingdom he ever wanted was the one we built together.